Kia ora and welcome to another special Niche Cache Patreon podcast episode. This is the third episode of the Niche Cast for our patrons, and this is the last episode that will be open to all members of the free world until the next podcast is going behind our Patreon page. So this is just one of the things that we're doing to give back to our Patreon whānau who basically keep the Niche Cache up and running with their generosity. So if you are listening to this and you do appreciate what the Niche Cache does in general, jump on Patreon and support us as best you can. Doesn't take much, we're not expecting a whole lot, but it's just the best way to support the Niche Cache and keep us flowing with our sporting and musical and creative opinions, ideas and thoughts. You know, we're independent as fuck. So we're out here doing it for the underground. So just support us as best you can. And yeah, all these Patreon podcasts will now be only for our Patreon whānau on Patreon. So if you are on the Patreon, watch out for your feed. Otherwise, if you're not on Patreon, jump on Patreon, support the Niche Cache directly, and you'll get this as well as a whole lot more little goodies coming your way. As always, I'm joined by the Wildcard. Wildcard, how's the naughty north of Aotearoa going on this Wednesday, early September, almost spring? How's Northland treating you?
Well, it is spring, isn't it? It's September now, but, you know, no sooner did spring arrive than the bloody winds and rain and all that, and went to take the car out yesterday, and there was a big old branch right in the middle of the driveway, so yeah, that's a bit of an indication of what's up to it. Couldn't take the dog out yesterday because he didn't want to go piss in the rain, so had to keep cleaning up the carpet. Not very fun, but that's that's a nice summation of where we're up to.
How is winter in Northland? What's the vibe like? Because Northland is a beautiful place in summer, an amazing place in summer, to be honest. One of the best, if not my favourite place to be in Aotearoa in the summertime, north of Auckland. What's it like in the depths of winter?
Well, yeah, I mean, first, I concur. Northland is the best in summer. It is outstandingly warm and, well, actually, it got a bit of a drought last year, but nah, it's bloody lovely. Winter, very Aucklandy. Not Aucklandy in the way where it like is just up and down and all over the show, but it was wet, and it was a wet winter, and it took a while to get there. But once we got there, it settled in for a long old winter of plenty of rain. Gotta love the weather chat to start, by the way. That's the thing, is before I moved to Northland, it was like the weather was just that boring old thing where it's like, well, I don't know how to make small talk. How's the weather been lately? But actually living, it's not because I live in Northland, it's because I live rurally now. But you learn to respect the weather, Doc. You learn to live in harmony with the weather, and you count down until the rain falls, because you got to fill that tank up one way or another. And if you want to have a shower tomorrow morning, it better rain, sort of thing. So, yeah, great respect for the weather gods these days.
Do you know what's quite funny about that is I hate small talk discussions about the weather, and for some reason.
But we're not talking small. We're talking big.
Yeah, that's the thing. That surface level of small talk just I can't do it. Like, I just have to go deep and meaningful rather quickly, and sometimes that can push people away. But then it also it also draws the right people in, because some people, they just want that small talk because they want no part of a genuine conversation with you. They're just doing the small talk because it's the social norm of how to engage someone. And going deeper than that isn't quite the social norm, but then that way you attract and you draw people to you who do have good listening skills and can listen to you talk for a while and then have a engaged conversation about deeper matters. Not in the world, because who wants to talk about politics? Who wants to talk about bullshit happening in the world? We're trying to talk about meaningful topics, but it is funny how we do kind of somehow are drawn to weather talk in these niche cast episodes. I do agree with you. For me, it's less of a case of like logistically having more water around you. It's more, for me, it's like the sun shining, now it's time to be outdoors. Then the rain comes and it's time to go indoors, and when you're indoors, you're kind of forced to go within a little bit. So when it's sunshine, that's your time to be outside. That's your time to be moving your body and enjoying the spoils that nature offers us outside. And then when the rain comes, that's the time to do the opposite and take it easy, chill out a bit, rest and relax. And that's the cue I take from the weather gods, is just when it's a bit shitty outside, when it's raining outside, take that as a cue to, okay, now is the time for me to relax. And that way you're always getting that relaxation, because, well, you can bounce back on that one, Wildcard. I'll let you do that.
Yeah, no, I get you completely what you're saying there. I will add that yesterday I went running in the rain, and it was a bloody lovely experience. It got absolutely drenched along the way, but it was, there's something refreshing about that, just like being out in the rain in a situation where at least I knew, because I was going running, going to get sweaty one way or another. It would, in hindsight, have been a smart idea to have left a towel in the car, but I didn't think that far ahead, so missed out on that whole one. But just like, I don't know, just there's something about being amongst the elements, that's quite refreshing and probably quite like primal almost for people. So I'll take a bit of that. I'll also add to your point that there is a certain kind of like, I guess like when it rains, obviously we couldn't just go live outside. Human beings would die if we just lived outside in the cold and rain and all this all the time. So you got to take the hints from what nature gives you. There's also a sort of like, it's not immunity, it's like the opposite of that. I'm not sure what the exact word is, but it's like people are meant to live in certain ways. People are capable of living in certain ways, but I think it's a very sheltered kind of like, when you grow to be like, oh, it's raining, day's ruined. It's like, well, no, it's raining so that the plants can grow, so that you can keep breathing oxygen and not die. Like there's a balance to things. There's like a what's the word? Like a harmony to the entirety of nature, and human beings don't live outside of that. They're a part of it, and so you gotta have some give and take. That's part of. There's the old social contract day where it's like there's rules in society where this is what you can break, this is what you can't break, and we do this for the survival of the group as opposed to the survival of the individual, which is a much safer bet. The survival of the group, all like bloody anthropology and all this sociology sort of teachings there. There's also the same thing though with nature, and I just read a book on insects the other week. And it was, quite interesting, because insects, often people talk about little bugs, how annoying they are, how, I hate wasps. Like, there's nothing good about wasps. They're just evil little creatures. It's like, well, wasps have a purpose for being as well. Wasps are there so that they can be they're like nature's little bodyguards, They go around killing little, overflows of other bugs and being little bastards, sure. What security guards aren't little bastards, but... there's a purpose there for keeping things in balance, and it's the same with other like flies. You got to have flies because the maggots eat up all your trash. Like who else is going to get rid of that banana skin otherwise? Like something you got to recycle these things one way or another. So yeah, I think often there's an element of certainly a modern culture, because people just, as we move up through the years, people get less like. People are less in tune with nature in a lot of ways, or like on a grander. Certainly, when you're living in the city, that's the case. And so people have grown to think like there's humans versus nature rather than humans within nature. And I can't stand that kind of thinking. Like whenever I see that, and it just happens all the time when you see examples of people thinking like that they're competing against animals and plants and the earth itself. It's like, you're not competing, man. This is your habitat. Like, this is your entire life's being, and everyone else's life's being is made possible by this bloody planet. So, you live with it or you live against it. I don't see why people get so bloody competitive, man. Anytime people get competitive, it's like I can't help but feel that's like a patriarchy type thing. But yeah, that's opening a whole other can of worms right there.
I like that idea because it's a weird balance, the old competitive nature, isn't it? Sometimes it's what sets you apart, and I think everyone has that competitiveness inside them, but it's how it's used. Because you can look like a proper dork on the sports field if your level of competitiveness surpasses the necessary level of competitiveness for that sporting occasion. So you often see it. This is what has turned me off from like organized out of season sports. So like off season sports. So summer soccer, summer hockey, summer touch, or whatever it is, summer netball, casual netball, because there's in those realms, I'm not competitive because I'm usually just mucking around with my friends, and then there's always other people who kind of ruin the vibe, ruin the buzz with their competitiveness. And it's like, well, can't you just turn it off for a second and just let the bigger picture of this game and what we're doing and having fun be at the forefront? But then that isn't to say I'm not competitive, because there's numerous examples, but I do have that competitive spirit in my loins. But I think you just got to understand how to use it to your advantage, and when and what context and what areas of your life to use it to your advantage, because you're never going to get anywhere if you lack a bit of competitive nature.
Yeah, I guess it's balance again, isn't it? Where it's like because that competitive spirit is like it's like that survival spirit as well. It's the same thing. Like there's a big overlap there of Jesus, it's pelting down with rain now, so I don't know if they can be heard on the microphone or not, but just carrying on with our weather conversation. Like that survival instinct is important to living. Humans wouldn't have reached this far through time if we didn't have that element of what can I do to get through the day. And sometimes that means, well, there's only one apple left on the tree. One of us is going to eat it. Well, I guess you can figure out a way to share at some point or another, and that's why societies form, because people realize you're safer to live in packs than it is to live as individuals. But that doesn't still mean there isn't that primal aspect of, I will survive kind of thinking. But I don't know. It's like there's a way where it's balance, isn't it? It's always balance. Like everything comes down to a balance, and that's how do you channel that, I guess? How do you channel that competitive nature? And when I played indoor football, I wanted to win those games. I wasn't devastated when I lost, but certainly went out there trying to do my absolute best to win. And what this is starting to remind me of is all the praise that Kane Williamson got as Black Caps captain after the World Cup final, where he just was like, bit of a shame that ball hit Ben Stokes' bat and skipped off for four. Bit of a shame, I think was the exact words he said. Yeah, that was a bit of a shame. And then even everyone else is being like, how are you not raging? And it's just like Kane Williamson is a very zen individual who understands that, we do our absolute best to win the game while the game is going on, and then afterwards, well, we either did or we didn't, and you can't change it at that point. So there's no point being competitive beyond that. You just got to channel it the next time you go out to play a bit of cricket. So he got so much praise. Well, I mean, they made him player of the tournament in part, I think, because of that. That's my little conspiracy theory, but certainly, there's just the good vibes around Kane Williamson definitely helped that whole thing. And it's, I don't know, it was just, did you think that was as a weird kind of thing to take in? I mean, I was definitely in a bit of shock because of the way the game went itself, and it was nice seeing people talking about what a great guy Kane Williamson is and how much they love the Black Caps for their sportsmanship and all that. And definitely sportsmanship, I think, is a very important thing, but I think that's almost the point, is that in most New Zealand sports, that's sort of expected of us. Is you give your best, but you don't be a dickhead about it, And there are certain elements where this crosses over. There's always gonna be where the line is crossed, but with the Black Caps, like it just didn't seem like anything beyond the ordinary. But I guess maybe that was a shake-up for some of those bigger population countries where people just have to be more competitive to get by. So I don't know. Did you find that all just a little bit surreal? Just that specific adoration he got for that specific kind of line of thinking? Because it did seem very like, I don't know, maybe I'm just more familiar with Kane Williamson than the overseas folks, but it just seemed like the expected thing,
I don't know, but I do know that Kane Williamson is a mindful person. Kane Williamson is someone who
Yes, he is.
works his way through meditations. Kane Williamson's a person who, as you said, he is very zen, but a more common thing is that he's just a mindful person who does practice meditation, and so that is the response I would expect from someone like that, not necessarily a New Zealander. Now, you could say that are New Zealanders more mindful than other people, other countries? I think we're a lot more self-aware, which can be incorporated into mindfulness, which could be an interesting idea. So
Yeah, bit of overlap.
I think a lot of people would say that that's like a Kiwi approach, that's how us Kiwis like to act and what us Kiwis pride ourselves on. But it doesn't matter what culture or where you're from or what you believe in, that is a mindful practice. And it's something that comes from practicing meditation and being in tune with your emotions and your thought processes, and from there you can understand the bigger picture. You can understand different ideas that help, like not worrying about what you can't control or what you can't fix or where you're putting your energy. And for some reason, when you're talking about that wild card, I went back to thinking about the terrorist attack in Christchurch and how the basically only people who had any sort of love for the terrorist were the victims. And I don't quite know why I thought of that idea. I think it was the moment when you're talking about it being a bit surreal when Kane Williamson was saying how whatever, pretty much after the World Cup final in a roundabout way.
Just sort of taking it in his
Yeah,
stride.
it was just like, okay, that happened, we can't change it, so whatever. We just have to, enjoy it, celebrate, move on, whatever. I got that same feeling when I heard one of the community spokespeople from the Muslim community in the South Island saying that they feel love and forgiveness and all those emotions towards the terrorist who killed a lot of their people, and they don't have the same hatred. Now, all the people around New Zealand, all the people who were not Muslim, the people who this did not affect, were the people with hatred in their hearts. Whether you're Pākehā, whether you're Māori, it's not a discussion about race or culture or religion. The general consensus was fuck this dude, hate him, and there was no room for any love or forgiveness. Now, the people who epitomized the love and forgiveness were the Muslim community. And that's that same surreal feeling I got, because I saw that and then I observed the general New Zealand population and how they reacted, and I saw what I wanted from the Muslim community in myself. So I saw what I wanted from Kane Williamson in myself, with the ability to take a mindful approach in dealing with such a loss in that arena. And then from the Muslim community, after the Christchurch terrorist attack, I saw a very mindful approach in a different way, because it's obviously the Muslim religion, but it's the same ideas, same concepts which float through all religions and all spirituality is like forgiveness. And being able to express love and find love and appreciation in your worst enemies is a powerful thing. So that's a road to go down as well. I'll let you follow up on that. But just generally, speaking on that generally and specifically, I don't know what I'm saying, but it was just weird how the New Zealand community, and it's not weird, it's very obvious, it's very telling, because the New Zealand community doesn't have that mindful approach where, now I'm just contradicting myself because I just said New Zealand might be mindful people before.
No, I know what you mean. I can pick this up later on.
But it was just like, why are the victims the people who have the most forgiveness and love in their hearts at this moment? And that was the biggest time for self-reflection for me after that attack. Am I capable as a human being to find that level of compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and love for someone who did those acts at this time? Because I'm watching the Muslim community do it. And I admire that. I find it wholesome, beautiful, and amazing. So do I have that capability? It was just a very strange moment after that attack that may somehow tie into whatever we were talking about.
Yeah, I saw the same sentiments, and I had the same reaction. I was like almost quite emotional to see that kind of. It's like nobility, isn't it? Like in the face of the absolute worst circumstances, to be able to say and like forgiveness doesn't mean excusing what happened or letting the fella off the hook for something absolutely terrible, but it means I am not going to carry the hatred that you tried to spread. That's the whole thing about terrorism, is it's trying to spread terror throughout people and communities, and that just that ability to and it's a very Islamic thing. I mean, Islam means submission, like submission to God. So it's certainly a part of that religion. I think you're right, though. It's a part of most religions, to be honest, is that real, I think nobility is the best word for it. In the face of evil and turning the other cheek, I guess, is the Christian aspect of this, and it's definitely a Buddhist thing as well, is not being swept up in emotional responses to situations like that. And there's trying to remember exactly what the saying is, but there's this unbelievable saying that someone said about resentment, I think it is. It's like, I don't know, I'll have to look it up. It's something like, I'll come back to that because I'll look it up because I want to get the quote exactly right. But the thing you're saying about New Zealand, I don't think it is a contradiction, because I see what you mean. Like, the self-awareness thing is 100% a part of Kiwi culture. It's like, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We don't, most of those top sports teams have their no dickhead policies. It's the same sort of extension of the same thing, and we're not going to get carried away by things we can't control and these kind of things. But at the same time, New Zealand is also a very secular society, so we don't have that spiritual or religious part of that. Like, it's the other side of that coin sort of thing. So I think that element of forgiveness in the face of terror and that kind of thing it's just, that part of it is a bit beyond us, because we have the sort of black and white everyday reality version of that, but we don't have the past and future version of it, as like the spiritual side of the whole conversation, which I think eludes the vast majority of New Zealanders. Not all, though. Kane Williamson is one exception. I want to look up that quote, though, so I can't remember where I was at. I was at with that.
And that's an interesting idea, because we are living in Aotearoa, and the indigenous culture of Aotearoa is the Māori people. The Māori people treat, like, to the best of my knowledge, Māori gods and goddesses are the land. it's the mountains, it's the ocean, it's the rivers.
Yeah, the elements.
It's what surrounds you, and so it's what ultimately like becomes you as the land. So that is automatically a very mindful state to be in, because you're aware of of the actions and consequences that you have on the land. So you're very mindful of how whatever you are doing impacts and interacts with nature, which is in stark contrast to the more secular society that you mentioned about New Zealand and Aotearoa. And I think the best thing for Kiwis to do, whatever nationality you are, whatever culture you are, is to, well, take up a more mindful approach. And like you, like, I'm not a hugely religious person. My method is to take the best bits of all the religion and just come up with being a mindful person. So the best thing that I would suggest for Kiwis to do, especially younger Kiwis, is to take up a mindful approach. And there's a whole lot of, we're big believers in meditation, yoga, all those things, mindful practice. But the best thing to do in Aotearoa is to look into Māori spirituality, because then you are learning about your connection to the land. You are learning about your connection to mountains, rivers, lakes, birds, whatever it is. And it doesn't matter what culture you are, whatever religion you are. A very basic, simple practice in Aotearoa is just knowing about Papatua Nuku, Ranganui, and what they mean to you, and how you can apply them, what you've learned about those sorts of elements, those sorts of spiritual figures into your real world. Because anyone in Aotearoa who is like living off the land in Aotearoa needs to know the power and the mana that Aotearoa has. And that's a journey I've been on, is learning about that spirit of Aotearoa, because there's a feeling you get when you come to Aotearoa. There's a feeling you get when you step out into the land, or just see the mountains and the water and the snow or beaches or sand, whatever it is that you see naturally in Aotearoa. There's a feeling you get, there's a spirit you get, there's a mana in Aotearoa. And I think that is something that all Kiwis need to not necessarily understand, because it's a difficult, I don't think, me as a Pākehā man, I don't think I'll ever fully understand it. So I'm not here to say that you need to understand it, but you need to be aware of it, and you need to incorporate those ideas into your life and into your mindful practice.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the history of the land as well as the people that have been there before you and all these kind of things. And so I looked up that quote, and this is so good. I'm just going to chuck it out there without comment because it's a very good quote. Resentment is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die.
So by swallowing the poison, you are filling yourself up with negativity. You are filling yourself up with negative feelings, emotions, thoughts, and then you are hoping or expecting that the other person who doesn't have any of those negative things inside them is going to feel the negative repercussions.
Yeah, and this is how those kind of negative feelings work, is that and it's something that when you practice meditation, for example, certainly something that like you learn when you're able to just sit there and switch your brain off for just any relatively limited period of time. If it's only 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 15, 20 minutes or whatever. Maybe if you're an expert, you can get up to half an hour. I'm not sure if I've ever touched that barrier myself, but when you can learn to turn your brain off and just eliminate the stress, even for just a short period of time, you realize that stress or that frustration or resentment, for example, these are things you carry within yourself, and you don't have to. Like you can turn them off, like they exist in your brain and nowhere else. These are your relationships to the things around you that you bring to them. Like they're not spreading these to you, you're bringing them to them. And yeah, like resentment, and I would suggest that is a translatable quote for a lot of other like jealousy, for example, anger, hatred, these kind of things. Like you're like the resentment is the poison, and by feeling resentment, you're injecting that into yourself. You're not spreading it back to them just because someone else, inspired it in you. And yeah, people need to realize, people can learn to understand that these are things that they don't have to deal with. You can just, it's not as much as ignoring it, it's almost just like overcoming it. Like once you realize that they're your own, that these are feelings of your own making, they lose their power. Like you can just brush them away, they're done. And I'll add, what is the antidote to resentment is forgiveness.
Forgiveness, exactly, as was outlined by the Muslim community after the Christchurch attacks, and it's something that, especially in today's age, Wildcard, I think that empathy and forgiveness is lacking. Now, I've just had an explosion of like 5 different ideas, and I'm trying to process them all. So I definitely think there's a level of empathy and forgiveness that is lacking in the world today, and it's so easy to see because no one wants to put themselves in the position of specifically people who are viewed as enemies or people who are viewed as doing things wrong. There's no empathy, there's no forgiveness towards those people in the modern society, and that flows into what we were talking off the mic yesterday about the Aquarius age, and we can finish this conversation going down that route. But what we were talking about just before with how the swallowing your poison and expecting the other person to die, if you've got that poison inside of you, if you've got those negative thoughts and negative feelings and negative emotions and just a busy mind full of stress and worry, if you've got those things inside of you, that has a physical effect. There's a guy called Joe Dispenza who has done a lot of podcasts with guys like Aubrey Marcus and those level of dudes who are on that spiritual empowerment journey. But Joe Dispenza's all over this, and he talks about how no one, like general people, and many of our listeners don't understand how our thoughts and what is happening in our brain impacts our body. Because if you have a whole lot of negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions in your brain, then you are triggering stress responses or certain genes or genetics in your body that cause a reaction. Now, if you're having negative thoughts and negative ideas and stress and worry, none of those reactions are going to be positive. They're all going to be negative. And then from there, you start to have some physical ailments pop in. Now, I'm not like a expert on this, so I don't want to suggest that you can like heal cancer with a stronger mind and a more positive mindset, but Joe Dispenza has talked about endless examples of people taking on a more mindful approach and being aware of their thoughts, and via meditation healing their bodies, being able to heal certain ailments or diseases coming into their body, because it's not very well known in this modern world how those what is happening in your brain then flows into what is happening in your body. A simple, like outside of the more spiritual realm, an easy way to think of it is just like, if you've got negative shit in your mind, you're setting off negative triggers throughout your body, and then what do you think is going to happen with those negative triggers throughout your body? Like your body's going to be under stress, your body's going to be inflamed, you're going to have a weaker immune system. And so it's, the more I learn in my own spiritual journey, the more I'm starting to understand how important it is to have clear and positive thought processes in your mind. Like, of course, you're going to have negative thoughts, but this used to mess with me as well. Like, you would have one negative thing, or you'd wake up with just some negative thoughts in your head, and then that sets the tone for your whole day. So not only does it put you in a shitty space for your whole day, but then think about all the stress that is going through your body if you're having just a negative day based on that one little spark earlier in the morning, where the power that you have as an individual is that you have the ability to be aware of that negative thought, be aware of that negative process happening as you start your day, and to reset it and just let things pass through you, and then get into, affirmations or a meditation practice or whatever it is, journaling, whatever you want to do, just to reset your mind and come back to a more positive space, because you can go down like a rabbit hole where one negative thing leads to another negative thing, and then you're just having a bad, shitty day because you didn't realize how powerful you are, because you're the person who controls what you're thinking. And if you can somehow find a way, there's plenty of ways, but whatever works for you, and find a way to be aware of those negative thoughts, give them the respect they deserve, and then reset your mind into a more positive frame, that's how you fix yourself. That's how you heal yourself. That's how you put yourself in better positions and start to attract better things coming into your life, which is what everyone's trying to do.
I am entirely on board with that idea about mental health and physical health being tied up together. Like I was going to use that metaphor again of two sides of the same coin, but I don't even think that's true. I think it's not a coin. It's not like two sides. They are the same thing. It's not even yin yang. It's like they're so intertwined beyond that. But I hadn't thought of it in that particular kind of way, because when you, like what you're saying, it reminded me like when you're walking around stressed and feeling threatened and things like this. Well, like think of a cat. Like what does a cat do when it's threatened? Its claws come out. Its tail puffs up. It like gets into a crouching position where it can either, the whole fight or flight situation begins to happen. And these are biological responses that they have. So biological responses, where they're coming from? They're coming from the brain, which has been triggered to feel a threat, this is how we respond to that. So if you're walking around carrying stress and carrying like anxiety and carrying these I don't want to say poisons, because it's a bit rough, because it's like these are things that people naturally every day are going to experience, especially in the modern world where there's certain things about the society and just the world and being alive at this time in history which exacerbate those problems. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. I think everyone knows the kind of things that I'm talking about there. Like, human beings have that same fight or flight response. We have those same survival instincts, and when we're threatened, our focus shrinks towards a specific towards that threat. And when, like, say you're say you're an ancient and you're attacked by a bloody like mountain lion or something like that, and well, you're not going to beat him up, but you got to get out of there somehow. Well, you're not going to be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner when you get back. You're thinking very, very specifically about getting the hell out of there and surviving, just like living a little bit longer. And that's fight or flight. And these things, like, there are biological responses that go on there. So say you've got like a little bit of high cholesterol or something at the same time. Well, your body's not going to be responding to that issue when it's busy trying to run away from a mountain lion. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure if this metaphor is gonna kind of wrap up nice and tidily, but it's, if you're if you're feeling threatened in some way, your body is focused on that threat, and your body can't do everything at once. So it's just it just feels natural that would be something that would something that would occur, that would then lead to other problems, that you're gonna, if say you've got a cold or something like that, where you're gonna struggle to fight that cold if you're too worried about fighting other things at the same time. Like, you can't you don't have a whole army to call upon here. You've just got yourself, and you can choose what to focus on. And it's easier said than done, because this is not something that you just do and then you've done it. It is an ongoing sense of just keeping everything in balance. You might have something else to add to that, but if you don't, I would quite like to, because I've heard this thing about the Age of Aquarius many times, and I've just watched that Tarantino movie a couple of weeks ago, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is very good, by the way. I would certainly recommend it. I wrote a thing about it the other week after I watched it, actually. So anyone who has seen that film is a Patreon supporter, although this is going out to everyone, isn't it? So anyone who has seen that film and is listening to this, go have a peek through the website, have a read of that. But it's like the Age of Aquarius was definitely one of those hippie things that they talked about. But I'm a little bit of a hippie myself, so I'm certainly open to these ideas. Can you explain to me the exact idea of the Age of Aquarius, so I can get like the guru lowdown on it all?
Well, how does it tie into the Tarantino movie? How does that?
That's just the movie's about hippies, that's all.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't specifically, although, I mean, because from what I understand, Age of Aquarius was meant to be like a changing of, not changing of the guards, but like a changing of eras, like coming into a new time of, I think like prosperity is the kind of word they use, and there is a little bit of a tie-in, not massively with that Tarantino movie because of the ending, and I don't want to spoil anything, but certainly with, like, it's about the Manson murders, and the Manson murders themselves were like this. There's a book, what's the Thomas Pynchon book called Inherent Vice, which is not about this, but sort of peripherally about this, where it's like an end of innocence, like the dawn of the end of the 60s, the end of that sort of dream, and because the Manson murders weren't just like a violent, horrific act, it was one that tied into the counterculture. It was late 1969, so it was the end of it was literally the end of the 60s coming up, and kind of like killed the hippie dream. It was swept up in Hollywood as well, and the music industry and all these kind of peripheral things. But yeah, it's so you can make a tie-in if you want to that, but it's more of a like opposite. It's more the opposite kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know if that quite answers the question. It doesn't specifically tie into the thing. It's just an idea I had extrapolating from it. It's
a very airy, fairy, spiritual topic. But when you look at the world today, it just smacks you in the face of what is happening in the world. And as you said, like, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not an expert on it. I just know what is happening. I don't know dates and all of that stuff. But basically, it's just how the Earth is moving through space, and then the power of the planets, and in conjunction with sun sign astrology and all of that stuff. And it's a period. It's an age that lasts 2,100 years. So total, you're looking at like 12 signs, you're looking at 26,000 years. So it's a very long and slow moving process where the energy starts to shift, and you see different ideas and different topics coming to the fore of society. And this kind of started, I think, as you said, it started with the hippie movement, and that was perhaps an introduction into the Age of Aquarius. And now, just to show you like how slow moving it is, now we are seeing other ideas come to the forefront of our society, and in a positive sense, you're seeing stuff as we're talking about, like we are part of it, because we're talking about mindfulness, we're talking about meditation, we're talking about being in tune with nature, we're talking about connecting with nature. These are topics and ideas that are basically trendy in the world today. Is this idea for a more simple life, and understanding that you don't want to be on your phone 24/7, that you don't want to be surrounded by technology 24/7. So everyone, it looks like we're blasting off to the future, whereas the Aquarius age is more of a wholesome kind of vibe to it, and understanding, yourself and just that stuff. So the rise of meditation specifically and the understanding of those type of practices is part of the age of Aquarius. Now in the real world, we're seeing a lot of drama internationally, and you're seeing how people and groups and organizations are struggling either against the age of Aquarius coming into our existence, or you're seeing them struggle to deal with it. So basically any of the stuff you see about like equality, about human rights, gay rights, gender equality, race, cultural equality, all of those ideas are part of the age of Aquarius. But at the moment, we're in this juncture where all of that stuff is being introduced while many people in the world are still stuck to the old ways. And they're still stuck to... I'm going to have to do a lot of research, and I'll come back in the next Patreon-only episode of the Nichecast, and I'll give you a full breakdown of whatever the age was before this and how it flows in, because it's something that I want to tell our Patreons about more, but I'm just uneducated at the moment, so I need to teach myself. But I know the general energy, but at the moment, all the shit is happening in the world, and people are fighting the rise of age of Aquarius because they're stuck in their old ways, and that's why you're seeing the conflicts in the world today. You're seeing people on the extremities going against each other. You're seeing, religions fighting. Like it's been present for a long time, but you're seeing the ideals of these religions and these your skin color butting heads against the more kind of liberal, free, hippie idea. And then you're also seeing the rise of those more liberal, hippie ideas being at the extreme end of the scale. So it's coming in full. It's coming in full hundies. And then you've got these people who are full hundies stuck in their old ways, and then you've got these new ideas coming full hundies in, and it's making this whole time a bit of a kerfuffle. So it's just like a piece of advice to anyone listening to this is just to chill out. Like there's going to be a whole lot more shit stirred up because we have to go through this as a human race, as planet Earth. We have to go through this because there's no choice. Like, we can't choose to stop the age of Aquarius. We can't choose to the more we fight against it, the more if you're fighting against it, is going to be in a position where you're ostracized, where you're struggling to fit into society, or you're just going to be, fucked up. There's no point fighting against it, but then there's no point fighting against the issues that this is creating as well. That's why, for me personally, I don't care what's happening in the world. I used to be so in tune with current events, and I thought, and I took it as like a personal pride kind of thing. I know what is happening in the world. I'm smarter than you. That type of thinking, that type of thought process. Now I don't care what's happening in the world. Now I don't want to know. I don't want to know what the latest drama over here is, the latest drama over there is, because I just want to focus on myself and my real relationships with the people around me. But I know that we have to go through this process. I know that shit is going to get real tough and real rugged and drama filled in the short term, because these are like growing pains. These are times where everyone has to adjust to a changing world. It might not be changing how you expect it, though. I think it's changing in a very, very good way, but these are the growing pains from all angles. And so there's no point clinging on to whatever you are clinging on to from the past. Now is the time to just let go and go within a bit more, focus on yourself, focus on being a better person yourself, and just letting everything figure itself out. Because if you get caught up in the dramas of the world, it's going to be a far tougher ride for you in adjusting through this process.
Right, and if you get caught up in the dramas of the world like that, and I guess when we say that, we're not talking about like the bloody actual events that are relevant and affect you, and like, I mean, like, I do keep up on the old current affairs and stuff still, but I try not to get emotionally swept up in things that are just silly, you know. And it's so frustrating because the whole anytime anyone talks about politics and America or the UK at the moment, it's just this stupid polarized, like completely one side versus the other, no middle ground. It's just the most annoying thing in the world. It's like, how are you ever going to find a democracy out of that? You know, democracy is compromise, and if there's no budging on either side, you're getting absolutely nowhere. But swinging this all the way back to the very start, and I remember you saying something about, you know, the old small chat with just random people, and I'm not very good at small talk myself. I'm just like, I don't know, I'm a bit more reserved in those situations where I'm just more cautious talking to people I don't know. I don't tend to reveal much about myself or things like that, and so I'm not good at small talk, and more of an awkward way. I don't come out here and chuck out like the Age of Aquarius ideas and stuff. Maybe I should. I think maybe that's a better idea. Is your idea, like your point of just like weed people out? Like you'll freak some folk out, and then every now and then you'll come up with someone who will actually like vibe with that. But yeah, but you know, the whole thing about people who don't necessarily want to hear something that might shake their worldview in a little way, well, this is what's going on, is people's worldviews are being shaken, and a lot of people, again, swinging it back to another part of the podcast, a lot of people feel resentment because the world they thought they lived in isn't like the things they thought they could get away with. And it's easy to feel sympathy for that, for people who thought that certain behaviors were not necessarily okay, but it just like you'd get away with it. Like if that's the world you're raised in, it's very hard to judge someone too harshly for that. Which is why I hate it when you get the like when you get the old like cancel culture backlash against things that happened in the past. Like unless it's an extremely serious case, like let's say Bill Cosby or someone like that, you know, unless it's something extremely serious like that, it's like just okay, you missed this one. You know, it was a different time. It wasn't right, but we missed this one. We can't rewrite history, so we can't go relitigating things that happened way back in the day. Like, let's just not worry about it and move on and hope that people are better now. And there will always be collateral damage from that. But yeah, some people have had their worldviews shaken up, and I think they feel resentment from that. And I guess the same, like, hey, what do we know about resentment, kids? Resentment is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to get sick. So that's the whole situation right there, pretty much. And yeah, I'm with you. Just simmer down and let things pass, and we'll come out the other side. At the other end of the tunnel, we'll come out in a bright, sunshiny day, and hopefully it'll be the dawning of the Age of Aquarius.
It's already dawned, Wildcard. It's already here.
Oh, right, sorry. Is this not... how does the transitional period work? Is it an overlap, or is it like a period of itself? Or I guess there's what did you say, 2,100 years?
Yeah, well, this is what I'm going to tell you. This is what I'm going to tell you next time. I got to do some more research and come back to you with some better facts and figures. But
is that an exact date? Because it's been 2019 years since Christ was born, so that seems we're nearing up 2,100 years since then. Maybe I should start going to church.
Perhaps, or maybe not.
Maybe we'll find out next time.
Maybe we'll find that those religions aren't quite going to exist how we thought they might in the future as well. But it's
yeah, there we go.
It's kind of undeniable. Like, all you need to do is just look at how society has changed. Like, even in a sporting landscape with like what we do at the Niche Cache, sporting wise, now you're seeing women's sport come to the fore. So you can sit there and say like, oh, you know, why hasn't women's sport been been at the forefront of our focus for the past 100 years? Well, that's not how society operated. Now, because the energy has shifted, because we have different priorities, morals, and values, now women's sport is starting to rise in prominence, and we're seeing a lot more resource and celebration of women's sport. That's not a coincidence. And it's not a coincidence that that is coming with certain other changes in society at this time as well. So from that perspective, it's undeniable.
What I'm really interested in, like one of those sort of like ideas that always comes back to me, and it's those things that I'm always interested in reading books about and watching documentaries about and films about and that kind of thing, is how, and this is, hey, maybe this is why I liked that Tarantino movie so much, because I'm quite interested in how, like, those kind of the hippie ideals of the 60s counterculture, how that overlaps with what we're going through now 50 years later. And 50 years is quite an important time frame because it's two generations. Like, it means you're skipping your parents' generation entirely. We're going to like grandparents' generation, or that maybe that generation slightly in between those two. Like, my grandparents were all slightly too old to be hippies, but yeah, because the thing about the 60s counterculture, and hey, perhaps this is exactly what we were just talking about. The thing with the 60s counterculture is that there was a backlash, and the ideas lingered on, but it's not like this was a majority of people. They were outsiders in their own society at the time, willingly, and that's cool. But, like, obviously there was a backlash. There was the whole Vietnam thing. There was a big, what would you call it? The mainstream pushback and these kind of things. And then also when it ended, and perhaps the Manson murders are often mentioned as the period when this whole, like, when the dream ended kind of thing. When it ended, you came into like the 1970s, which were a much more like, if the hippies had free love and opening your mind with new substances and stuff like this, well, then the 70s just had like, instead of acid, you had cocaine, and it just got into a much more hedonistic kind of nihilistic point of view. And then you come into the 80s when you had like a big corporate kind of pushback to that, where now you've got like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, and there's this sort of new conservative movement, and you're going in this opposite. Like, it's funny how these waves go, and we're maybe swinging back around now toward maybe it's every 50 years these things happen, and you just got to hope that there's progress at the same time, because it is a bit like a seesaw, but it is also like maybe it's not so much a seesaw, maybe it's like the two oars of a boat. You're leaning on your left and you're leaning on the right, but all the time you just got to hope you're moving forwards and not towards the waterfall or something like that. But yeah, I'm quite interested to see, because it's easy to say that it failed, but a lot of ideas from those from hippie culture lived on and survived, and are more prevalent now, much more prevalent than some of the ideas that were considered mainstream in 1960s. Especially some of the things that we're talking about now with feminism and racial equality and whatever. Like, well, the 60s was like the first wave of feminism, and the 60s was the civil rights movement and stuff like this. So this is probably not a coincidence as well, that other aspects from a culture thinking in a similar line, in a similar direction, are also coming up with these things. So yeah, I'm always like, I'm skeptical when people say that it failed, but it obviously didn't take hold, because we went in the other direction as a society for the 20 years after that. So, like, first of all, I'm curious about the ideas in general and the things that overlap. Second of all, I'm curious about, like, how do we get these things to take hold? Like, how do we dig in our heels and make sure we don't, like, there is a backlash right now. There's a backlash to this kind of thing. There's a rising bloody nationalist movements all over Europe and in the Americas, and it is a backlash. And how do you not let that backlash take hold for the next 20 years? I guess that's the trick. But I think we're much better suited as a society to actually, like, make some progress here now compared to where we were in the 60s. But hey, maybe the hippies did some nice groundwork for us. I don't know.
While you were talking just then, I started thinking about Game of Thrones.
Always a good reference point.
And I think there could be some parallels to what we're going through society, and what we saw in Game of Thrones, and then what the general consensus, or what is happening in the books as well. And we know that there is a book coming called The Dream of Spring. And I don't know, it just feels like we're heading to a point where some certain events are going to happen, which aren't going to be nice, but are going to happen, and then you're going to start to see the dream of spring kind of emerge.
Yeah, well,
If those events haven't already happened, like, we may be entering the dream of spring right now, and we just need to get over the hump, certain thing. But to go back to what you're saying about the stop-start nature of it, I believe that applies to anything you're doing. So if you're trying to kick a drug habit, you're gonna quit and start again, quit and start again, quit and start again until you quit for a long time. If you're saying, no, I don't want to eat fast food, you're gonna, I'll have some fast food this week, and there's gonna be one time, and then you're like, oh no, I need to get back on the wagon. Like, those sorts of instances, it's never easy just to click your fingers and make a change. It's never easy to click your fingers and move past an addiction. Those aren't easy things to do, but you can't just like give up. Same with anything in life, you just can't give up when you stumble at the first hurdle. The whole point of the race, the whole point of the journey, whatever it is you want to call it, is that you keep going through those hurdles, and then that's the journey. That's the process that you're learning, and you're gaining more information. You're learning about yourself, what works for yourself, what doesn't work for yourself, and then down the track, everything's easier, and you can kick that addiction. You can make whatever changes you want to make long-term sustainable in your life. But I think at the start of anything like that, you quit smoking, and then you start smoking again. You quit smoking, you start smoking again. And it takes it a few times until you have whatever you need to be able to, quit something long-term or make long-term changes in your life.
Yeah, progress isn't a straight line necessarily.
Definitely not. Do you have anything else to add, or else we'll wrap it up there?
Yeah, nah, I don't know. We've burnt through a fair few pages on this one, so
Beautiful piece of work for our third episode of the Niche Case Patreon podcast. So after this episode, everything will only be for our Patreons. So hopefully through these 3 episodes that are open to everyone, you've learned a bit about how the Niche Case thinks as well, and what makes us who we are, and in turn what makes the Niche Case as well. And then if you are on Patreon, big it up to you. We appreciate you, and we will continue to strive to get some more goodies, some merchandise, more content for our Patreons, just to ensure that we are talking and doing what we talk about, being generous and full of gratitude and mindful. So on behalf of the Niche Case, kia kaha.